It was a July night when all of a sudden Kalinka was found dead. This is her story, and we're going to get right into it. Hi, we're the Decomposing Flowers podcast. I'm your host, Kira, and with me is Jen. In our podcast, we talk about true crime or true events. Today's case is a little bit dark. It's something that hasn't really been covered too much that I can see. There's some essay, there's murder. We're just going to get into it. So, a couple of the most important people in today's case. We have Andre Bamberski. He was born in France around 1938 to a family that came from Poland. During World War II, the German forces relocated him to Germany and Poland, so he kind of bounced around a whole bunch. And this kind of shaped him for being resilient and having a deep-seated distrust of the German administrative process. By the early 1970s, Bamberski had established himself as an accountant, and he lived in Morocco with his French wife called Danielle Go.
Ganin.
I'm pretty sure that I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm not French. And they had 2 children, including their daughter, Kalinka, who was born in 1967. In Casablanca, the Bamberski family entered the social circle of a Mr. Dieter Krombach, who was born in 1935, very similar to Andre. And he worked as a cardiologist and a physician for a bunch of German people. He was a very highly regarded professional, and a lot of people thought very highly of him. Although his personal background left a little bit to be desired. Notably, the sudden and unexplained death of his first wife at the young age of 24. A lot of this personal details was never looked into, and later on, some people would scrutinize why this was not looked into further. During their time in Morocco, Danielle and Andre had an affair, which eventually resulted in the dissolution of their marriage. Danielle and Andre were married in 1977 and relocated to a Bulgarian town located on the shores of a lake called Lake Constance, along the borders of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So it was a pretty swanky place. Kalinka and her younger brother eventually moved to live with their mother and stepfather, setting the stage for the tragic events which would happen in July of 1982. The precise events is difficult to understand, and there's a lot of mystery behind it all, mostly due to a bunch of confusing claims and the failure of the local police. Of course, on Friday, July 9th, 14-year-old Kalinka spent the summer afternoon windsurfing on the lake. When she returned to the family's home at approximately 5 o'clock, complaining that she was tired from the sun, she spent some time alone, and the family dined together at 7:30. After which, Dr. Krombach administered an injection. He initially claimed that this injection consisted of an unnamed compound designed to assist Kalinka with tanning more easily. He later claimed to have checked on her at 10:30 p.m., offering her a glass of water and then giving her a sleeping sedative at midnight because her light was still on. The following morning, however, at July 10th at approximately 9:30 a.m., Dr. Krombach came downstairs dressed in equestrian attire for riding a horse in the mountains. They're pretty rich. Upon entering Kalinka's bedroom, he found her unresponsive. Despite his training as a doctor, Krombach failed to call the ambulance or any emergency services. Instead, he initiated a weird series of injections, claiming they were attempts to revive her. These injections included dopamine, powerful narcotic, choramine, Novalgirol, and isopodin. Oh my god, I brutalized that, but I tried. Anyways, it was just really, really strong drugs. When medical professional actually showed up, Dr. Jobst, he confirmed that Kalinka was dead and noted that rigor mortis had already set in, placing the approximate time of death between 3 and 4 a.m., long before Kronbach attempted to resuscitate her. At approximately 10:30, Kronbach telephoned Andre in France, claiming that Kalinka had passed away from a cardiovascular collapse brought on by the heat stroke. The autopsy, however, which was conducted July 12th by a team of German pathologists, marked a bunch of irregularities and omissions that Dr. Kronbach failed to note. He was permitted to be present near the autopsy room during this time, and he told a lot of things at the time of the autopsy, which was put into the medical report. The physical findings of the autopsy, however, were very alarming, pointing to severe trauma. Pathologists documented fresh blood on her leg and a distinct tear between her legs with a mysterious white substance inside. I'm sure you can guess what happened, unfortunately. Additionally, there was multiple puncture marks noted on her arms, her right leg, and thorax. She also had undigested food in her stomach. Because of the metabolic process at death, the presence of undigested food contradicted the estimated time of death of 3 and 4, unless Kalinka suffered a severe physical shock or had died much earlier than Kronbach claimed. Despite these indicators of homicide and assault, German pathologists failed to conduct a toxology report on the blood or tissue samples or analyze the white substance, even though we all know what that is, and took no steps to secure the crime scene. And they removed her entire reproductive tract, which was just weird. During a brief telephone interview with the local police department, Kronbach changed his narrative all of a sudden, claiming that he actually, in the evening, it wasn't tanning that he was doing, it was cobalt and iron to help treat her anemia, which she didn't have. He also admitted to injecting dopamine to revive her. Later, a French investigation revealed that Kronbach had also injected all these other things into her randomly, and French medical experts concluded that it is highly dangerous to put all these drugs into one person at one time, as it administers a immediate cardiovascular shock and asphyxia. Jeez. Despite these contradictions, local police did nothing. They closed the case that same year in October, saying that there was no evidence of foul play. In 1985, after Andre successfully petitioned the French judiciary system to open up an investigation, Kalinka's body was exhumed, and they revealed a setback that her entire pelvic cavity was cleared. Her kidneys and rectum were completely missing. Why? No idea. The physical evidence that proved the key linchpin in this case was permanently destroyed. In 1988, a panel of forensic experts from France analyzed the remaining medical reports and concluded that the injection was the direct cause of her death. Immediately after, there was a whole bunch of legal battles that followed her death. The family couldn't just grieve, and it was even harder because this was across borders within Europe, and it was a bunch of jurisdictions fighting over the death, and no one could really get a foot in, and obviously there was some kind of a cover-up going on here. The French system, however, formally indicted Kronbach in 1993 because Germany flatly refused to extradite him and they considered the case closed. He was tried in absence in Paris in 1955, and the French court found him guilty of voluntary homicide and sentenced him to 15 years in prison. This conviction, however, triggered a legal gridlock. Under French law at the time, a defendant tried in absence wasn't permitted to be represented by legal counsel in the courtroom. Kronbach appealed to the European Court of Human Rights that it violated his rights. Like, he needed the right to a fair trial despite doing something not so good. When Andre attempted to enforce that there was damages associated with the conviction in Germany, the German courts referred the matter to the European Court of Justice, and they ruled that the French conviction violated his right to a fair trial. German courts were legally justified in refusing to enforce the sentencing and effectively turn this into a shield for Kronbach. For the next decade, he continued to live as a free man in Bavaria. As you can guess, however, he continued his behavior. This wasn't a one-time kind of thing. In 1977, however, he pleaded guilty in a German court to drugging and sexually abusing a 16-year-old female patient in his clinic. And the court gave him a 2-year suspended sentence. Aw, poor guy. In 2006, he was only sentenced to 18 months in prison for continuing to practice medicine without a license and continuing this predatory pattern. Bulgarian authorities consistently refused to reopen investigation or surrender him to the appropriate authorities to face justice. In 2009, Andre faced a critical deadline. Under French law, the 30-year statute of limitations for manslaughter was about to expire in 2012, after which Kronbach would never be held for his crimes. Furthermore, Kronbach had successfully sued Andre for defamation in a German court, winning him approximately £150,000. If the limitations expired, Kronbach could use the legal system to financially destroy Andre. Realizing that all legal avenues had been exhausted, the now 71-year-old Andre decided to take matters into his own hands. He coordinated a plan to abduct Dr. Kronbach from his home in Germany and forcibly deliver him to French soil to face justice. On the night of October 17th, 2009, 3 hired kidnappers confronted the 74-year-old Kronbach at his residence. He was struck in the face, bound, gagged, and driven across the border into France. In the early hours of Sunday, October 18th, French police in the border city received an anonymous phone call. The caller, speaking with a simulated Russian accent, informed the dispatcher that a wanted fugitive had just arrived, 4 blocks away from the police headquarters. When the officers arrived, they found Kronbach lying in a courtyard, bound at his wrists and ankles, bleeding from facial wounds, but fully conscious. Upon having his gag removed, Kronbach immediately stated, "Bamberski is behind it." The following day, using cell phone tracking data, French authorities located Andre at a nearby hotel. He didn't deny his involvement. Instead, he maintained that he was not physically present during the abduction. In his hotel room, they discovered a bag containing £19,000 in cash, the precise amount that was designated for his anticipated bail. While Germany voiced strong protests over this violation, like, whatever, you're violating his rights, the French state made a critical decision. Because Kronbach was now physically present on French soil, he could now face trial. The trial of Dr. Kronbach began in Paris early 2011, drawing intense media coverage as this was huge. For the first time in 29 years, Andre sat in the same room as the man who was responsible for his daughter's death. On October 22nd of 2011, the French court found him guilty of causing intentionally bodily harm resulting in an unintentional death, which was manslaughter. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. This conviction subsequently appealed all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, which upon in 2018 was officially upheld in the French verdict, including that his right to a fair trial had been respected during the 2011 proceedings. In 2024, Andre stood trial for his role in orchestrating the kidnapping of Kronbach. And the court was under intense scrutiny because this was just a father who wanted justice for his daughter's killer. There was sympathy for him as he had spent his entire life savings and nearly 3 decades getting this man behind bars. Ultimately, the French court handed Bamberski a lenient sentence with only a 1 year suspended prison term, which was much better than the shit Kronbach was given. The case remains significant as it's a study in international law, ethics, and just justice. Like, why do we let borders stop a rapist from being put behind bars? Like, what? Why do we protect them? The legal maneuvers that Dr. Kronbach and his defense team leveraged was insane, especially how they won him decades of freedom, even though the man did not deserve it. And at the end, it's a story of love of a father and how it wasn't out of disregard for the law, but just that there was no other options other than kidnapping to get this guy behind bars. And just the extraordinary lengths that a father will go to secure justice for his daughter. And that's where we're at in today's case. It's a quick one, but it deserves to be talked about. So let us know your thoughts down below. As always, we love your case suggestions. You can leave them in the Google form down below. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.